Hello, artists! This is your introductory video for ancient Greece. I'm just going to give you a basic overview of what we're going to talk about. So, just like last week, we talked about how a lot of these civilizations started because of natural resources. Now, Greece already had a count against them. It was really hard to farm in Greece. Greece is comprised of over 1,000 islands, but only a couple hundred are actually inhabitable, and even less are good for farmland. So, the one thing that the Greeks had going for them is they had a lot of oceans around them. So the Aegean Sea, the Ionian Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. That gave the Greek people food, ways to trade, and some natural barriers. People, in order to attack them, people had to get onto ships, and there were mountains protecting them from other civilizations as well. So the Greeks, despite all of this, and they still had the city-state where each city was considered its own government. Despite all of this, the Greeks considered themselves one people. So the Spartans and the Athenians, they all considered themselves Greeks, which was pretty interesting because it wasn't politically unified or put together for a long time after that. So the ancient Greek periods with art and history are the geometric, the archaic, and the Hellenistic periods. We're only really going to talk about the classical and the Hellenistic periods in your reading and with the art that we're going to talk about. So keep that in mind. Okay, when was this? We're going to look at our timeline. This is what we started with last week. So you can see the orange was Mesopotamia, the yellow was ancient Egypt, the green is Greece, and the blue is the Romans. So we'll talk about the Greeks and the Romans this week. You can see the Greek period lasted for a really long time, and they accomplished a lot during that time. So we'll see how this all fits together. All right, where is Greece? That's good to know, right? So, in your world map, it is what I have highlighted in green. So you can sort of see all the different islands that are trickling off of that. This, everything that's colored is what we visited so far in this unit. But you can see right there is Greece. All right, what did the Greeks accomplish? That's always good to know, right? What are we going to talk about? What's going to be in this unit? Why do we care, basically, about what the Greeks created? So, the classics. The Greeks are often called classic because that was the name of one of their periods, due to the fact that they created a lot of things that we still use today. The Greeks have influenced people for more than 2,000 years. The Greeks gave theater and drama, so that's pretty cool. They invented the stage. They had public plays, amphitheaters, Greek tragedies, Greek comedies. All that was invented by the Greeks. The Greeks also gave us Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey. So if you've ever read that in school, that's probably familiar to you. Important mathematical theories, the Pythagorean theorem, for one, that you learned in math class. That's from Euclid's geometry and others. They created they made a lot of sense of the world. Several branches of science and others, zoology, biology, astronomy, ecology. They also worked with philosophy, and the Olympics originated in Greece. So the Greeks really developed a lot of what we still use today. All right, politics. Politics also originated in ancient Greece. You have the ideas of government by the people, trial by jury, and equality before the law. So when our founding fathers were figuring out our country and what they were going to do to establish our new government, they looked to the Greeks and the Romans for inspiration. Religion was also really important. The Greeks loved to tell stories or myths about their gods and goddesses. They believed that humans were also really important. This is shown in Greek myths, where people and gods actually interact. In mythology, gods sometimes influenced or manipulated human events, and then mortals or regular people also influenced the gods. So in a lot of societies, humans and gods did not interact. So it was kind of interesting that they thought that humans were that important. As far as Greek gods and goddesses, they probably sound familiar to you if you grew up learning about it, watching the Disney movie Hercules, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. This might be a little bit familiar to you. So Apollo was the god of music, poetry, art. oracles, archery, plague, medicine, sun, light, and knowledge. Hades is the god of dead and riches and king of the underworld. Aphrodite, you've probably heard of, goddess of love and beauty. Athena was the goddess of wisdom, poetry, art, and war strategy. And then Poseidon was the Greek god of the sea, earthquakes, storms, and horses. There's also Zeus, which is the god of the sky and weather, and god of all the gods. So those probably are familiar to you. Architecture. So we'll focus a lot on architecture in this lesson because a lot of it's still standing, or we can visit the ruins today. So ancient Greek architecture reflects their beliefs. They believed that religion was important, so there's lots of temples dedicated to gods and goddesses. They also, because they thought humans were important, they also built civic structures like public spaces like theaters, courthouses, gymnasiums, an acropolis where everyone would gather for political things or just gatherings. So those are the kind of things that they built, and a lot of it is a complete masterpiece. So the things that we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about the Acropolis, we're going to talk about the Parthenon quite a bit. I'm going to give you some basic Greek architectural elements or vocabulary. We're going to talk about Greek orders, so the different Greek orders. If you come to live class, I will talk to you about my trip to Nashville to visit the full-scale replica of the Parthenon. So I have some pictures in the slides, and I'll talk about that and how cool it was. Okay, sculpture and pottery are the other two things that we're going to talk about. So artists of ancient Greece admired the human form. They often sculpted people in the nude, which means not wearing any clothes. In the classical period, sculptors didn't want to create stiffly posed front-facing figures anymore. So we're not going to see the kind of sculptures that we talked about with ancient Egypt. They started to sculpt things that looked lifelike and natural, and they studied the movement of the body in natural poses. So the sculptures that we're going to specifically talk about, we're going to talk about the general rules, how the Greeks created sculpture, the sort of rules that they followed, and how to be able to spot a Greek sculpture if you see one. We're going to talk about classic sculpture. We're going to talk about the Parthenon, the sculptures that are there. We're going to talk about Polycletio spear bearer, which was a really important sculpture. We're going to talk about the contrapposto pose. Hellenistic sculpture, we're going to talk about Laocoon and his sons, and the winged victory of Samothrace, or Nike, who's the goddess of victory. We'll talk about those. And then for pottery, we're just basically going to talk about how they created black figure pottery and the technique on which they did that. So a little bit of background information about it and how it was created. All right. As you read and go through these lessons, I want you to start thinking about your art projects. So we'll have an architecture challenge for your art project, which means that anything that we talk about that's a building or a structure, you can try to recreate using any material that you want. So paper mache, clay, anything that you want, paper. You could also sketch a famous work. So as I go through some of these pieces of art, if you really like it and you'd like to try to sketch it, you can make that your art project. You can also create pottery. If you like the Greek black figure vases, you could try to create one with the air drying clay or paper mache. You could also do the photo challenge, which is a scavenger hunt of different architectural elements. So going around your city or town and finding columns or pieces of architecture that are inspired by the Greeks, or you could always choose your own. The assignment from this lesson are the end of lesson review. You'll want to make sure that you read and you practice your questions before you take the Ancient Greece and Rome quiz. You want to make sure that you complete writing assignment 3. And you also want to make sure that you complete the vocabulary test and, practice and study those words before you do that. You can take the test open book and have the Google Doc open as you take it, but studying the words will help you do well on that. Okay. Have fun reading. I will have live class if you are confused, or you can watch the recording and let me know if you have any trouble with any of this. Thanks, guys.